Alright, so in this video we're going to walk through styling a web page using a style sheet. So what I have here is an index page. It just has some fake text in it using the lorem ipsum text. It has an image dumped in. And if you load this into the browser, what you're going to see is it looks very boring. It's just text, a picture. There's been no modifications to how it looks. And I've already run the page through the validator, so it's checked out as valid HTML or XHTML 1.1. Now that we're going to introduce style sheets, we also need to run our style sheets through the validator. So if we go to W3C validator service, we can click the CSS link and we can upload by file upload our style sheet and check it. And I've no errors at this point. So usually what I suggest is that when you are doing homework assignments, I suggest that you do a little bit of coding and you validate. A little bit of coding and you validate. That way you avoid a long list of validation errors. If you do a little bit at a time and make sure that each little bit validates, that can be a real lifesaver. So in my header section, in the head section of the web page, I have included the link tag. I am linking to a file whose relationship with this web page is that it's a style sheet, and the hypertext reference is for my index page to look in the style sheets folder and look for the style.css file. So a style sheet, you're going to need to save it with the .css file extension. So that's the first thing, and then this links over to the actual style sheet itself. And the first step when you're setting up a style sheet for a web page is to define for the body of the page some basic defaults. So it's common to specify the body's color, background color, the font family, font size. You usually define defaults for the page. And here's why you do it. As a web programmer, you want to have control over what the user sees in their browser. And browsers are going to have default style settings that determine or dictate how they display in the web browser the tags that you use to implement your web page. So by defining your defaults, you override the browser's default. You get rid of anything that might be sitting there stray that's going to misinterpret the appearance of a tag that you have. So usually you define the page default. So for example, I could say I want everything in the body to have color, if it's text, to have color black. And with style sheets, we have something in play that's called inheritance. So that means now that anything inside of the body tag on the web page, so here's my body tag, anything between the opening and closing body tags on the web page, if I define the default font color to be black, everything on the page is going to inherit that color. And then if I want individual elements on the page to have a different color, I need to define the color differently for those elements. So we're really setting the defaults for the whole page, and then we change them as we go. So we can set the default font color to black, which it already is. If you look at the page that's here, it's already black. We could change this to a named color, like red, for example, and then hit save. And I don't know why we would want red, but if we do red, it's going to be everything in red except for the links, because links have their own color scheme depending on whether the link has been unvisited, visited, or whether you're hovering over it in the moments. And those are characteristics or properties of links that can be changed. But all the other textures, my header tag is red, my paragraph text is red, everything is horribly red. And we talked a little bit earlier about the idea that colors are defined using hex values, and don't want that one, I want this one. So when we're talking about text colors, we want to be able to identify the colors that we want. So if I go here, let's see, color picker, I want the W3C. W3C actually has a page, or pages even, dedicated to the hex and RGB values of different colors. And so here's a place where you can look up and identify colors for web pages. Another thing that you can do is research on the internet and find color pickers. So for example, I know it's not supported anymore, but I use ColorCop, for example. I think there's probably better ones now. It's just the one that I am accustomed to using. So ColorCop, what it does is it gives you the RGB values for colors, which you can use in cascading style sheets to change color values. It also gives you the hex codes. So for example, if I'm on a page and I decide I want the color of my text to match a color in my image, maybe I look down at that lake and I think I like the color down there, or I like the color of blue on the shirt, or a color green on the grass, or darker green on the tree, I can use ColorCop to hover over the color I like, and I get the hex code for that color, which I can then move into my style sheet and say, hey, use for the text, use that color that I saw in the image. So Control Save, and then back to the page, Control Refresh. And so now my default text color has changed. So that's just some ideas of what you can do. So you usually want to set your font family and your font sizes. So I could say, hey, for my font family, set it to Arial. And if the browser can't find Arial font defined in the system, at least use a sans serif font. And sans serif font is simply font that doesn't have those nice little curlies on it. So if we pull up a web page on sans serif font, you see serifs are these little embellishments that you put on letters, and sans, which means without, these are without serifs. So I have serifs and I have sans serifs. And generally the idea is that if your browser has, if your computer screen has poor resolution, the serifs can render poorly. And so you're better off in most cases, not all cases, using a sans serif font on the web. But you can you should do some research on serif versus sans serif font in a web context on your own. The other thing that's good to know is there's web safe font families. So if you go to the W3C page for web safe font combinations, things that render well on browsers, they have some ideas for different font groupings that you can do that should render well in most browsers and most operating systems. So that's just something to look into on your own. So anyways, I have font family Arial, sans serif font size 12. So if I save that change and I go back to the page and I update, let me get rid of some of the crud I opened. We update it. The font changes, style. We can make it larger. So I'm doing it on the point system right now. So I could say, hey, make 16 point font. And notice that the PT point is not separated from the 16. They're together, and that's not on accident. So I'm going to hit save or Control S, hit refresh, and now the font is larger. There are other ways to define fonts. Another popular way is to use M's, and my understanding of the M is that one M, EM, is going to be whatever the browser default for displaying things is. So each tag, the browser will have default font sizes for those tags, and one M would be telling the browser to do it based on the default size set for the browser. So if I did like 1.5 M's, that should say whatever the default is for each page element, do 1.5 times that size. So there's 1.5 M size font now on my screen. A little bit large. I'm going to set it back to 12 point font for right now. So 12 point 12 PT font, and save and shrink everything back down. And that's a little bit better maybe. I guess I could try having a split screen going. See how that goes for a while. I don't like that, but all right. So color, we can change the color of the font. Font family, we can define the font families that we want. Font sizes, we can define the default font size for the body. We can define the default background color. So for example, if we do get rid of some of these hiders, so I don't want to unhide that one yet. I keep that one hidden. So background color would be what page do you want in the background of the body. So right now I've got who knows what color that is in there. Let's do something ugly to start with. We'll do red. We'll make it stand out. So Control Save, and over here Control Refresh. Whoops, no pound on the red. Control Save, over here, Control Refresh, and there's a red background, which is horrible. Sometimes it makes a little more sense to base background colors on images if you're going to have thematic images on a page. So I might take this and say, hey, I'm going to set the background color to match the lighter color on that rock. And I could get the hex code for that, Control Copy, and paste that hex code in. Control Save, over to the web page, refresh that, and now I've got a background color that's matching the rock in the picture and text color matching the tree. So those are some possibilities. We can add images to the background of a page. So I'm going to unhide this next little piece, background image, and you have to say what the URL or uniform resource locator of that image is. So it's just the reference. And my background image, notice what I'm having to do here. I'm in a style sheet, and the style sheet is inside of the style sheets folder. So my style.css can't see my images folder, so I'm having to back out. There's that back out of the folder, back out .. back out of the folder, which we've seen before, and then look for the images folder, which is here, and in the images folder look for the background 2.jpg. and the background 2 is I took an original photo and I then lightened the background so that it wouldn't overwhelm the text on the page. So if we go in and we save that change and go back to the web page, let's open this up large and hit refresh. We've got a background image on the web page, and of course now the text doesn't show up well against that, so what you would do is set it back to a darker colored text probably. So we'll go back to black, which is 0000000, that's black. Refresh, whoops, escape, Control Save, and then refresh that. Now we can see that a little bit better. What you want to notice on the image is it actually repeats itself. So down here you can see they're walking down here and they show up again. So the image by default tiles to fill the page. We could take a smaller image, so like let's say this little rock here. If I take a snip of that, let's go up here and grab a snipping tool, a new snip, and say, hey, grab a little piece of that rock. Ooh, come on, be good. Oh, come on, there's not cancel. Let's not be like this. Let's see, that was this picture right here. Let's Say I want a new snip. Give me a little piece of the rock. Why is it not giving me a piece of the rock? Oh dear. Okay, we'll go right in here and get it. I'll do it the easy way. Pull them up. Let's scroll in on that rock. I want a piece of that rock right there. So I'm going to go new, grab a piece of that rock, and I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it into my folder that I was working out of. And I'm in my work folder. I'm in the internet programming folder. I'm in here. I'm in images. I'm going to save it as background 4. Save. Yeah, replace it. Get rid of the snipping tool. Close that. And now if I pull back up into Sublime and I go into my style sheet, I can make. I just saved that as background 4, so I have that little square piece for background 4. So I'm going to change this over to background 4, save, and then refresh this page. What it's going to do is take that little image and it tiles it. So the default behavior is for image to tile to fill the background if you have it set as the background. You can stop the tiling behavior by going background repeat, no repeat. So that's one of the ways of changing, and we're not going to go over everything that you can do. This is just a quick overview, and you're going to need to do a lot of research to figure out the different characteristics, that the different properties that you can change and what values you can change them to. So if I set it to no repeat and refresh, now I have the background color, but that little tiled isn't repeating and giving me that texture in the background anymore. If I set this back to background 2, and I've set to no repeat now, and I save that, what I'll see is that picture is only there one time. It's only there one time, and then the rest of the page is filled in with color because I said don't repeat the image. So we can make some further modifications. We can say, hey, where do we want the background image to be? I could say, hey, maybe I want it positioned in the center of the page instead of off to the left. And if we do that change, we now are going to refresh and it will be in the center. Of course, everything else right now is sprawling all over the place, but we'll fix that as we go. And then one thing to notice here, when you scroll up and down, the picture right here is actually scrolling with the text, but we can actually get the text to scroll over top of the picture if we tell that background attachment to be fixed, a fixed position attachment. So if we refresh, I need to control save, and if we refresh that, now the text, if you pay attention to the text, you'll see that it scrolls up and down over top of the picture. So those are some things that we can do with the body. It is not comprehensive, and for most of these properties there are many values that you can set them to, and what your job is to look them up and see what the possibilities are, because there are many possibilities. We could talk about this all day, and we would never run out of things to discuss. So here's my paragraph tag. So the next thing I'm going to change in my style sheet, I'm going to change how my paragraphs are looking a little bit, and here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make a few changes. There's my closing paragraph tag. So width, I can define the width of my paragraphs. My paragraph is a block level element, and I can say, hey, I want it to be 480 pixels wide. For context, the background picture that I use, background 2, is 800 pixels wide by 1067 pixels tall, so it's 800 wide. So if I set my paragraph to be 480 pixels wide, it will not be as wide as the picture. Margins, so remember we can add margins and padding to block level elements, and if you don't remember what those were because we haven't used them that much yet, we'll pull up a picture that we looked at earlier. So Anytime we have a block level element, which a paragraph is, it by default has a border. So the blue line here represents the border of the block level element. And then usually by default that border is 0 pixels. It's a border that you can't see because it has no width. And then around the exterior of the block level element, you can define the margin width. And you can do that as a percent. You can do it in pixels and ems. Usually most measurements can be used. And you can define the margin top, the margin bottom, the margin left, the margin right. So in other words, you can define each margin individually, or you can just go margin and say, hey, margin, colon, 10 pixels, and you would get a 10 pixel margin around all of the sides. So if you don't tell the browser whether you're applying the margin to top, right, bottom, or left, it just applies it everywhere. And then the padding is on the inside of the block level element. This will be what comes between the block level element and the content that is inside of it. And the key thing to realize with block level elements and their margin and their padding and the border widths is they're all things that add to the overall width of the element. So the element may be a certain width to begin with, like 480 pixels, but if you add margin, border, and padding to it, you have to add those measurements onto the overall width of the block level element. So let's see how this plays. Let's see how this plays out. So here's what's going on here. I'm going to tell my I'm going to tell my paragraphs to be 480 pixels wide, which is going to be almost half the width of that background image. Margin Auto tells the browser that for each paragraph, it wants it to look around the paragraph and then evenly distribute the margin, especially the left and right margin, to distribute that evenly. And then I'm going to add a border, and I'm going to define multiple properties of that border all at once, multiple values that border can, not properties, but multiple variable values it can have. So I'm going to say, hey, let the border be 1 pixel wide, make it be a solid line, and make it be black. And I'm only doing that so that you can actually see the block level element that the paragraph is. And then the padding of 10 pixels is going to put space between the paragraph rectangle and the text that's inside of the paragraph. So let's save this and see what that looks like. I'm not doing this very efficiently. Control refresh. So my paragraphs have sucked down. They're only 480 pixels wide now, plus the border width, plus the padding width, and you can see between the text and the border of the paragraph, there's the padding width. I did 10 pixels, so around the text in the paragraph, there should be 10 pixels of padding. If we didn't put that padding in there, let's do 0 pixels of padding, which would be the default, and then we save it, and then hit refresh. Then we see that the text is right up against the edge of the paragraph rectangle. So that padding puts that little space in there. Got too many things open all at once. So I'm going to change it back to 10 pixels. Control save. So the margin auto, the margin auto, the effect that it is having on the page is that it's looking to the left of the paragraph and to the right, and it's seeing what margin is available horizontally, and then it's splitting the difference and giving half of the margin to the left side and half of the margin to the right side. This picture I have is actually wider than 480 pixels, so you see that it extends out of the side of the paragraph as a result. When we're messing with this, we can change things. Like I could change the border to 4 pixels and make it wider. There are lots of things I can do besides solid. So for example, I could do dashed, I think. Is it dashed? And we could change it to a funky color like red. I mean, we can do whatever we want with it. And then we can also make it wider. Now see, the paragraphs are running together. right here. So we could actually define top and bottom border. So I could say, hey, let's say I want some margin. Let's cut this and move it up. Let's say I want some margin at the bottom of each paragraph, and hit save. Put some margin at the bottom of each paragraph and save, and now I get separation of 10 pixels at the bottom of each paragraph. The picture that I put here is exactly 800 pixels wide. So let's see what happens if we change the width of the paragraph. I've already got the margin set to auto, I don't need that. Let's see if we change the width of the paragraph to 800 pixels and see what happens. Now the picture that I have in there is exactly 800 wide. And I did it again. Control save. I hit control refresh sometimes on accident. Control refresh. And what you see is that the paragraphs, even though I told the paragraph to be 800 pixels wide, it's extending out beyond the 800 pixel wide picture that I have set in the background. And this is because I've added 4 pixels worth of border width and 10 pixels worth of padding, and that's being added on both sides. So if I wanted this dashed line to line up exactly with the picture on either side, I would need to subtract from this 800, I would need to subtract 2 times the padding and 2 times the border. So I would need to subtract 28 pixels from this. So what would that be? 20 would be 780, and minus another 8 would be 772. Is that right? So save that, and then go back here and refresh, and that pulls the paragraph down to be exactly the same width as the 800 pixel wide picture. This is an important thing to remember, that adding borders and padding add to the overall width of the block level element, and this can mess you up if you don't pay attention to it and you're trying to get things positioned the way that you want them on the screen. We could change the default font size. We could define the top margin if we wanted to. I have it set to 0 pixels right here, and that's only because with the bottom margins, if I change the top margin to 10, it's going to double the distance between those paragraphs. No, I did it again. Control save, and then if I did this efficiently, I wouldn't have to keep doing it. Anyways, if you add extra margin on the top and the bottom, that margin's going to be additive, unfortunately. So don't usually need it in both spots, and there I clicked the wrong thing again. So I'm going to set my margin top at 0. So font size, we could change the default font size. So right now I'm saying for my paragraph, let it be 1M. That's the default font size for the page. If I want to make it a little larger, like 1.2, I could do that. So I could say make it 1.2 times larger than what the browser would typically display it, and refresh. We can add padding around pictures and things as well. I'm not going to fuss with that today. Well, there we go. That's why it wasn't. If we do that, I lost a semicolon, and it wasn't behaving the way I was expecting it to. So I was sitting here thinking about it. So control save. If I do 10 and 10, it should double the width. And then if I change the top margin back to 0 pixels and the margin bottoms at 10, a good thing to do if sometimes if things aren't displaying the way that you want them to, is to run your CSS through the validator, because part of why something might not be displaying correctly could be that you've got an issue with the code that needs to be fixed. So right now, let's see. We've got the paragraph defined. It's the width of the picture. The background picture is fixed, so we're not scrolling. This header, we should probably move this header over into position as well, because it's kind of in an awkward spot sitting over there. So if we fuss with the header, header level 1, we can change the background color of it if we want. We can change the border style. I can make it solid, border width 4 pixels. That's kind of matching the 4 pixels I have up here on the paragraph. So if we just save that real quickly, you can see that the header is the entire width of the page at the moment. It doesn't have any padding on it, so the article is right up against the edge. So we could kind of make this match the paragraph if we wanted. We could say, hey, let's make it the same width as the paragraph. Copy and just paste that width information in, same width as the paragraph, and have the padding match. My mouse was not playing well with me, so let's match those. Oh dear. And then we would have to, we've changed the width of it, and now we need to get it to squish over and float to the middle, so we'll set the margins to auto. So margin, set that to auto, and then save that. And then that should pull that header over into the center of the page. And this paragraph here doesn't have any margin on the top, so they're running together. So we could put some margin on the bottom of the header box level element. So we could say, let's define some margin on the bottom, and let's put 10 pixels to match what we were doing before. And then if we do that and refresh, now we've got margin on the bottom. And we can keep zipping along. So border styles, I don't need that. Border width, I've already done that. Border radius is kind of fun. So there are different ways that you can change how that border looks. Border radius is one of them, and this is going to put a circular bend up into the corners. So if you save that and you watch the upper corners on the rectangle, when we save it, that border radius is going to bend a circular feature into that header. So again, these are just some ideas. We'll do some more extensive styling when we get into the next assignment. Right now we're just making sure that we have enough in our pocket for the next homework assignment, and then the follow-up assignment that what was it, 7-page website that you built, we're going to style that using style sheets. So anchor tags, the anchor tags, those are our links, and the anchor tags by default are going to change color if you've already been there, and by default they're going to be underlined. So you can remove the underlining if you want to. So to remove the underlining, you use text decoration, and you just say none and hit save. And when you refresh, the underlining under the link will be gone. And then you can actually change how it looks. So anchor, you can do a visited, a hover, anchor tag, a visited, for example. So this changes how it looks if you've already been there. And there are other anchor tag examples. I don't think they're a hover, a visited, a active. You're on that page right now. A link. So what we can do is go in and, don't know why that's open. We can go in and say, what do we want the color of it to be? So let's say we want to control this color that we have on the page. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of this so that I don't have as much to fight with. What color do we want it to be? Pick a color, any color. Oh, who knows? Let's make it. Let's make it red for right now. Got red going on, and then if we hit refresh, should be red, and we could actually change the background color of just this paragraph right here. We could say let's change the color of just this paragraph. So what we can do in here is we can say let's make a paragraph. Let's go P dot and say links. So this is an example of what we call a class. We're creating a class, any paragraph that belongs to the links class. Let's change its background color. Background color. And in fact, let's make the background color of this links paragraph the same as the header background, just because we can. So up where the header was, its background color was right here. So we'll just take that background color, dump it in here. So this says anything that's a member of the links family, any paragraph that is a member of the links family. You're creating what's called a family, a class. Anything that's a member of the links class is going to have this color. And then I'm going to save this, and then what I need to do is go into my index page, and this links, the paragraph that has my link in it, I'm going to need to give it a class. I'm going to say you are a member of the class called links. And so now this paragraph gets to behave differently than the other paragraphs behave. So the other paragraphs, all of the paragraphs on the page, are going to be obeying the style information right here where we say this is how we want paragraphs to behave. And this is saying if the paragraph is a member of this family, then its background color gets to be different than the background color of the other paragraphs. So if we slide over here now and refresh, the paragraph right here now has a different background color. And then we could say, well, what color do we want that link? Maybe we pick something out of the picture again that isn't red. Pick a color from the picture. Oh, that was for the link. I don't want it to be red. Control Z, Control V, there we go. Control S, and now Control R. So now I have this color, and then we can actually get these colors to flip-flop. So what we can do is say, hey, the anchor here, A colon hover, the hover behavior, we're going to change it. So we're going to say, hey, when you hover, let's do color, and let's for its color do the color of the links. So the paragraph that has the link in it has this background color. Let's take and make, when you hover over that link, let's change the link's color to match the background, and then change the background color of the link to be the color of the original anchor tag. Paste that in, colon, Control Save. So now if we hit refresh, Control R, and I look up here, when I hover, the hover behavior will be change the background color of the link to the text color when I'm not hovering over it, and then take this background color for the paragraph and change the link to that color. So we get something to where it makes it really obvious to the user that that is a link and it's going to take us out to some other web page. So this brings up the idea of having classes versus having IDs. So if we have a class, we can have anything on the page be a member of that class. So here's my p.links. I can change this to a class, and if it's a class, it means, I can change the class, p.links, I can change it to an ID, and an ID, just like a social security number, has to be unique. So if I change this and I say there's only going to be one paragraph on the page that is a link paragraph, so I don't want any other paragraph to behave like the links paragraph does, so I put a pound in front of links, and this changes it from a class to an ID. So if I hit Control Save, I would need to go into my style sheet, and my link paragraph where I said class equals links, I would say the ID is links. And then if I hit Control Save and don't mess up, this link piece here should not change how it looks. And I can, if I want, try adding this ID to another page. So I could say this paragraph, let's make him ID equals links as well. So we'll save that, and then we'll slip back over here and hit refresh, and we'll see if the background color here changes. And it does. So it changed to the color that we said the links needs to be. But if we try to validate this page now, W3C validator, if we try to validate the page, we're going to get an error message. So go back up here, index page, check, and I should get one error because it says, hey, links has already been defined. Links was first defined here. You tried to give two paragraphs the same ID. So an ID is unique. Only one thing on the page can have that ID, and the page won't validate if you try to set two elements on a page to have the same ID. So because there's only going to be one paragraph that contains a link, maybe I say, hey, ID, an ID of links for the link paragraphs. But I could have other paragraphs on the page. Let's go garish, garish pink. So garish pink would be having a garish pink background. And I did the dot garish pink, so instead of an ID, it is a class, which means many things can be members of that class. And then I could come down here and I could have another class called dark green. So let's call this even p.dark green, and we'll change some colors there. And these are classes, so any paragraph that we make, for which we give it that class name. So I'll change this paragraph class. And let's make sure it was garish pink and dark green in camelback notation. So class equals, let's make him garish pink. He's a member of the garish pink class. The next paragraph, I'll make him a member of the dark green class. The next paragraph can be a member of the garish pink class. The next class can be a member of the dark green class. And we'll make you now garish pink. And now if we hit save, we should get paragraphs that alternate between garish pink and the dark green definitions. And if we go into the validator now and try to validate the web page that we had that didn't validate before, if I didn't mess up, it should validate, because now I only have one element on that page. I have only one element on that page with an ID of links, and I can have many elements that are members of the same class. So this should be enough background for us to be able to tackle the next homework assignment that you're going to get. Again, you're going to need to look up a lot of these things and see what the possibilities are. So like background repeat, there you can get things to repeat just horizontally, just vertically. You need to go on and read about every possibility, and the best way to do that is to Google the question that you have and then go into the W3C page results that come up for it and look at their examples and explanations of how to modify the appearance of the page using cascading style sheets.